No, this is not your computer. It's not your side. It's actually really dark here. We have a big thunderstorm going on. I still have my lights on. People in Venezuela don't have that option. Because Nicolás Maduro must go. He must seize to the people's needs and wants, get them the aid that they need. It's not acceptable, it's inhumane, and this is what socialism does. And this is a blueprint many people on the left wanted to follow before Maduro even went in, and even when he started. Yeah, let me put the light on, okay? Because I don't want to fall, but those poor people don't even have electric. So, let's see. There we go. Oh, is that bright? I don't know if you can hear that, but we're getting that thunderstorm. Anyway, I am done with the left pushing socialism down my throat. And if anyone out there hears me right now, I'm talking as a woman, as a mother, as a person, and as a human being. That's what socialism does. Wake up. Thank you. This is Mom on the Right. And I wish you a good day. Hi, this is Corine with Mom on the Right, and today is a very special show. We're going to be talking to Jose Nino, and he was born and raised in Venezuela. He's come to America. He is a prolific author. He's going to share about his upbringing, what's going on down there in the politics, and the myths about gun control and how what's happening down there is because they took away their rights to own guns. And all of us, TLBTV, want to say that we're praying for you, and we want to see more liberty down there and see your people happy, because I believe you have family down there. So without further ado, I want to introduce you to Jose Nino. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you for having me on, Corine. Yeah, just to give you a brief bio.
Thank you.
I came to the States at a relatively young age in the late 90s, right before Hugo Chávez was elected in 1998. And at that time, a lot of people don't realize this, but Venezuela was going through a pretty significant cultural and economic decline. Not as bad as it is now, but things were already badly set in motion. Then my dad had to close up his business in 1996. This was a year when like inflation there was like at 100%, and he had to like do a lot of readjustments. So eventually they came to the conclusion that things were looking quite bad and possibly were going to get worse in the future. So they made a judgment call to move to the States, bring me and my sister to the States. I got involved with like conservative politics and like libertarian politics, like in 2007 through the Ron Paul campaign. And since then I've been involved in some shape or form with activist groups and other like educational groups. I've been doing a lot of writing. I had a stint with a gun lobby, the National Association for Gun Rights, for a few years. Now I do freelance writing for various sites on economics and politics. And I think the Venezuelan case is very important because it is the current poster child of socialist failure. And they've had socialist policies for the past 50 years. It's
Okay.
not just Hugo Chavez, it's also just the general political culture. If you look at the Venezuelan opposition, they're actually quite socialist. In fact, the interim Vice President Juan Guaido a few days ago even said like what Venezuela does not have is real socialism. He even said stuff that did not achieve social justice. So in turn, you have like a political system that's really communist for socialists at this point, and I'm pretty pessimistic about the political outcomes for Venezuela in the short term and possibly midterm.
Mm.
But I do think it's a very important lesson about the dangers of like authoritarian collectivism and its many variants, and how a lot of people in the United States simply don't get this, specifically the younger generations.
Yeah, it's just, and they're just feeding on the younger generation. Like, as you know, I mean, the Democrat, socialism is just like, it's just going bonkers here, even with everything. What can we do? I mean, America's going to probably get involved in some way, but at this point, what's going on in Maduro, man? What can we do? What can, the United States do? He's not letting go of that seat.
I take a more non-interventionist approach. I think that that Venezuela, regardless of what happens, is probably going to be in like socialist dire straits for some time. I'm of the opinion that the U.S. needs to beef up a lot of its border security and whatnot and its immigration system so that it actually attracts like decent immigrants. And also it should have special asylum programs for like right-wing dissidents and like free market types in Venezuela so that they can like stay in the States for a bit. But it's really a difficult situation, in my opinion. I've written articles how I think the strategy for Venezuela should be to promote secessionist movements within the Venezuelan country, specifically regions like Táchira, Mérida, and Zulia, which is in the western part of Venezuela. It's one of the more culturally different parts from the country, and I think that private military contractors and other types of security services can facilitate movements like that to break away part of the country and turn it into kind of a capitalist buffer zone. But I think with the current situation in Venezuela, I think another type of intervention or nation building scheme is just going to be way too costly. It'll have unintended consequences. And I don't think necessarily it will guarantee that the country will go back to like capitalism or whatever, because cultural and political habits tend to die hard in third world countries like Venezuela. It's been under some type of socialist form of governance, whether it's social democracy or it's tyrannical socialism. So it's just not going to flip the switch overnight. It's probably going to have to go the route a lot of Eastern European countries, such as the Baltic Tigers, where they have like actual free market leaders, such as the Estonian leader Mart Laar, that completely rejected socialism and emphasized more of a market economy and whatnot. But right now, you really don't see that in Venezuela. I think that the best Americans can do is raise awareness, donate if possible, though the government is preventing a lot of aid from coming in. And also really, I think, get the ball rolling with private military services to get wealthy Venezuelans to pitch in, and also other people to pitch in to try to at least break the country apart, because I think that in its current state, it's very difficult for me to see the country going capitalist across the board. It's more likely to do that in a particular segment of the country rather than the whole.
No, thank you. And you know, what struck me about you, and I never we talked about this short, before we started, was that the fact that they took away their rights to have any type of arms. That, just kind of empowered the government more. Can you tell me about that article and why you feel this way?
Well, this is just like the Venezuela's socialist economy. It didn't happen overnight. In fact, Venezuela has never really even had a Second Amendment, even in its democratic phase. But the government obviously doubled down in the past 20 years with gun control. And a lot of Americans do take this for granted, that gun control isn't just about like defending yourself from criminals. It's about defending yourself ultimately from tyrannical governments. It's a tool that you really want to have in those kind of situations. And many Venezuelans are regretting this after the government passed certain disarmament laws in 2002 and even in 2012 that not only like restricted the ownership of an overwhelming majority of firearms, but it also facilitated certain buyback and confiscation programs, specifically the 2012 version of the civil disarmament law. And now Venezuelans are just completely defenseless against not just the government, but many of the criminals and paramilitary groups that have popped up ever since the country has just completely collapsed.
Mind-boggling. You mentioned earlier how good we have it here. I'm worried about, the storm maybe knocking down a tree, but these people have no electricity. We do take a lot for granted, and there are people in the Congress, as you know, that's been all over the news for like months and months. You got AOC. I'm really concerned about, this is why I did the show, I'm concerned about the direction of this country. And they wanted to follow that blueprint of Venezuela. Like you said, we can just, get your message, have your articles out there. We could do like podcasts and stuff like that and TV shows like Sean Hannity has. But can we stop this from happening? Can you stop this from happening in America? I mean, I think bit by bit it's happening, that we might be a socialist country.
I also am of the opinion that the U.S. is slowly descending into that, because when you look at the left, they're very good at political organizing, like across the board when it comes to culture, business, and stuff like that. They basically control almost all the Fortune 500 companies. Obviously, Hollywood is under monolithic leftist control.
Yeah.
They've destroyed civil society as well, with churches and also Boy Scouts. So when you see that, even when Republicans get elected, it seems like they can never really pass good policies that actually not only help people, but also keep the left at bay. And they just keep marching forward and forward. It's like almost as if like they were 3 to 4 steps ahead of us. And what I'm more worried about is the cultural acceptance of socialism, because as the late Andrew Breitbart said, politics is downstream from culture. And if you see trends already with not just Hollywood, but all these normal TV shows and companies endorsing cultural Marxism and other variants of socialism, you know that's going to be coming into our political arena in 10 years. And I think that's something that a lot of right-wing, conservative, libertarian people need to get on top of, because we cannot be playing defense all the time. We have to be able to mount offense, because eventually he who wins is the one that scores. And when you have a group of people that are relentless like the left, they're going to eventually put points on the board, and eventually the game will be out of reach for us. So it's time to get like culturally aware and push back like as soon as possible.
And we are seeing this in like Hollywood. A lot of Christian, writers, producers, directors are emerging, trying to kind of, have that influence over there. What I'm concerned also is about the fact that, you know, you have the new senators, the left, that are not even, I used to be a Democrat, but I wasn't so far left, I'm falling off a cliff somewhere. So once Nancy's gone, once a lot of the old establishment is gone, it's like I believe that it's little by little and accepting it. Like, hey, who doesn't want free education, right? That sounds amazing, right? I don't want student debt. Things like that, free, free, free. And can't we learn from Venezuela and other countries? And why won't we learn from what's been going on elsewhere? Is it our arrogance? I mean, it's unbelievable.
Well, it's definitely part of a multi-decade process.
Okay. Right.
Since
Yeah.
the government has basically taken over almost every aspect of society and progressivism has become the norm, that you have like generations of people, especially like millennials and whatnot, that have been just taught and conditioned to hate a lot of capitalism, hate Western society, hate limited government.
Hey, you gotta hate the rich, right? So, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And just a lack of education. That's the problem when you have the government control the education system, and also when you have even political operatives on the right, there is some to blame that they haven't been fighting the right battles. They haven't taken notice of like these cultural trends. So you have a really nasty combination of factors that allows for socialism to appeal to gain traction. And even specifically on the corporate front, which is rather unprecedented because back then you could at least count on business owners, big or small, medium, whatever, to be relatively free market. But now that's starting to change. I saw the other week Ben and Jerry's, the ice cream company, endorsed the Green New Deal in the statement saying that we need to get behind this to save the planet.
Have they read it? I mean,
yeah, that's the thing.
Ridiculous.
Well, that's also to another point too. Western society is so spoiled that they can engage in such destructive behavior thanks to the wealth our prior generations has accumulated. And as a result, you see these companies obviously taking very economically destructive policies, and they can survive it because they're so big. But try doing that if you're a small mom and pop business or medium-sized business. The Green New Deal would eat you alive. But for incumbents like Ben and Jerry's or any other bigger corporations, the Green New Deal will be just like, yeah, it'll cost them some, but they'll still be afloat. But 95% of the rest of the companies, they can't say that.
No, and it's that's why people are afraid to speak out. You know, people, you know, are just because we don't have millions of dollars to fight things, and you know that's why we're doing these podcasts and writing these articles and stuff like that. Freedom of speech, thank God. Hopefully that'll never be taken away. Yeah, that is just the whole Green Deal was I talked to an associate at the Mises Institute. It's just a joke. It's a joke, and he told me that they did. You know, they made it so extreme that you would be like this. So then they can modify it to be like, okay, this is not so bad. So what are your thoughts? Maybe you should run for office. Some advice. That'd be great. Can you tell me what you think of the new Green Deal as far as being in a change in it to get people to like, okay, this is not so bad. You know, they'll let us eat, you know, a hamburger maybe. Drive a car or what have you. What are your thoughts on that? Because you know they're going to come up with some revision. Gotta be some.
Yeah, this is how the left operates. And to their credit, they're effective at this. And I think the right can learn tactically, obviously not ideologically from this. But they float pretty ridiculous trial balloons. In these kinds of legislations like the Green New Deal, where they'll say like we're going to reduce this amount of like carbon emissions by like eliminating meat and stuff like that. It's like ridiculous at first, but that's how they capture everyone's attention. It's really good marketing because it gets everybody chatting. And by creating this non-existent problem, it makes everybody think psychologically that there's a problem and thus we need a solution, which is going to involve the government, because that's how American society is these days, how much we've culturally shifted. I think that they're going to modify some stuff to make it more palatable, to get some more like milquetoast Republicans and moderate Democrats on board. And then they can also count on a lot of really wishy-washy Republicans to provide their constructive Republican alternative proposal, aka crap bill, to that actually grows the size of government and perpetuates the status quo we're living in. Because unfortunately, what we see in DC is that the entire swamp is just corrupt on both sides. And
Absolutely.
You have, and I think this is relevant for Venezuela, because in Venezuela, the past 50 years, most Venezuelans, the Venezuelan political system has not had like a conservative or free market option. It was like literally you were choosing between Hillary Clinton or Bernie Sanders every election cycles. And then now they have a totally tyrannical government that's not going to allow them to have any choices. So that's how societies evolve over time. And I think that we're kind of seeing that in the US.
Thank you. And you know, on the final note, have you heard from the people of Venezuela? I mean, it's a stupid question to ask how they're doing, because I know they're struggling. Have you heard, is there any silver lining here? I mean, the inhumane acts and so forth. I mean, can you give us a little, there's got to be some type of hope. You know, what are you hearing from the ground there?
Most of my friends and family have like left the country, and they're doing pretty well abroad. I only have like distant relatives in Venezuela now there, but the only silver lining, I think, is that you have a lot of these Venezuelans programmers getting into Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies as an alternative to their failing currency, the Bolivar, which is probably going to be approaching like 1,000,000% in terms of hyperinflation soon.
Oh my gosh.
I think that their embrace of that technology, which I think is kind of like the future of money and payments, will be a very positive trend for the country, because Venezuelan millennials, for example, have never seen a single year of single-digit inflation. The last time Venezuela had single-digit inflation, I believe, was 1982 or 1983. So an entire generation has seen a government that has completely trashed its money. Yeah, I think that's the silver lining there. Also, the educational experience showing a lot of other countries in the region, especially Colombia and Brazil, which have relatively market-oriented governments, that this is what happens when you pursue these kind of harebrained policies. But I think that a lot of like whatever positive that comes to Venezuela is going to be more in the long term. I don't really see any really much of a positive coming like in the next 5 years, maybe 10 years, but definitely not in the next 5.
So it's going to be a rebuilding. Basically, it's going to be it's a long-term goal is just going to be rebuilding, and that's if we get some of these yahoos out of there. Finally, I got to ask you, how about the oil? I mean, it's oil rich. I mean, they should have so much resources, but is it true that the government just squandered it, and now the people are suffering?
Yeah, I mean, this is also a big theme in Venezuela over the past 50 years. The government has owned it in some shape or form because they nationalized it in the 70s. And a lot of Venezuela's problems in the 90s that my family faced were built on the nationalization that happened in the 70s. But one thing to note, though, is that when Hugo Chávez came to power, he not only continued these policies, but doubled down and completely lobotomized the state-owned oil company and
That's
just
right.
put a bunch of cronies there, and it's completely wrecked the country. They use the petroleum money to vote buy. Vote buying has been a major theme in Venezuelan politics for the past century or so. And yeah, that's just another sign that you don't want the government to control a certain sector of the economy, because you never know what kind of actors will be in power further down the line. Because you might get lucky the first decade with relatively competent people in power, but the next decade you would easily have would-be tyrants, government toadies, and just leeches, just completely destroying your country because of the fact they have the keys to the government ignition.
Wow, thank you. And I know I said finally, but I kind of want to hear what's the next thing for you. No office? You're not going to run for office? No, maybe.
No, I'm not particularly interested in running for office. I do like lobbying, though. I'm a big proponent of people using grassroots lobbying as a means of holding their politicians accountable. But
love it.
At this moment, I'm mostly just trying to build my profile as a writer, not so much run for office.
All right, I just want to throw that out there. Just throw that out there because I want you to come back. I want you to come back. Regardless, I want you to come back because things are just going to be rocking and rolling. You got 2020 in the election. But I want to thank you. I am just honored. Thank you for your information and educating us, because, you know, a lot of people don't know what the heck is going on over there and how it plays into here and the deception and all that fun stuff. And I will love to have you back on, and thank you so much. And if we can do anything for you, I'm going to give links, and you're going to get a link to the book. You're going to get links to his articles, and I want you to really, really look at Jose, because he is very prolific, and he's going to do big things, guys. You hear that? You heard it here. Here. Okay. All right. Well, thank you, Jose. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me on, Corine. It was a pleasure chatting with you.
Thank you.